Hi, I'm Professor Green, and today we'll be talking about Chapter 15, Informational Speaking. Let's go ahead and get started. First, we'll talk about informational speaking and what that is as a definition, and then we'll talk about functions of informative speaking, the role of the speaker, types of speeches, and developing speeches. So, informational speaking. This gives the audience information that they do not know already or teaches them more about a topic. It's one of the most important skills that you will master, right? Because throughout our lives, throughout the business world and personal experiences, that very often we'll have to give an informational speech, right? As they say, right? When we talk to our kids, we don't necessarily give them a manual for different things. We give them a speech or we give them information verbally. So you can think about thinking to your kids or future kids, or even telling your parents about the day you had at school, the type of day you had at school, right? That's an informational speech. And speeches to inform are the most common types of speech. And this is researched by Glades in 1999. So as I mentioned, right, informational speaking will come up time and time again in your life. Let's move on to the functions of informative speaking. So we have four major functions here. The first one is to provide people with knowledge. The second one is to shape our perception or influence what is seen, right? So very often a car salesman, right? He is an informative speaker. He's telling you about all the different models that they have, all the different types of cars, all the different, maybe potentially about the competitors. So he's giving you options so that you can make an informed decision, an informed choice about your buying purchase, your car purchase. Also, we articulate alternatives, help listeners understand the number, variety, and quality of alternatives available. And lastly, we enhance our ability to survive and evolve. Our safety depends on the successful communication of facts and knowledge, right? So what comes to mind is that, my husband works in emergency preparedness. And so he communicates to his clients what it will take if we have an earthquake or if we have a fire and you have to evacuate very quickly. So he tells you all the basic steps that you need to prepare with, right? You need to make sure that you have all of your important documents in one place. You need to make sure that you have a bag of clothes ready to go. You make sure that you have actual hard copy photos of your family members in case you get separated and you need to look for them. So all these different things are things that we learn through talking to consultants or professors or teachers. They are verbally communicating information to us. Now we're going to talk about the role of the speaker. The first part is to be objective, right? So we're not persuading anybody with an informative speak. We're just telling them the facts, right? So our intent here is to increase the audience's knowledge in an impartial way. We're not asking the audience to take action or change their mind. We're just simply teaching them something, right? And so very often we can get passionate about our topic and we want people to take action. But at the end of the day, we're just being objective and telling them the facts. So, for example, I've had students in the past to choose the Black Lives Matter topic for their informative speech, but this is tricky, right? Because we can often get very passionate about a topic like this, and we'll, at the end of the speech, we'll to inform people on how to write to their congressman or to go to rallies, etc. But that's not the point. If you're talking about Black Lives Matter for your informative speech, you simply want to tell them the facts, the history maybe of how Black Lives Matter, how that initiative came into society, maybe potentially telling them the current state of the initiative and where that is headed. But you don't necessarily want anybody to partake or get involved in in your informative speech topic. You also want to be credible. So you want to be well prepared and qualified. Your reputation that precedes you and that you develop during the course of your speech is important. You want to help the audience identify with you, right? So um, talking about that Black Lives Matter topic, right? So I had a student, so he said that he was an African American and that when the George Floyd issue came up, that he felt unsafe walking on the street. So, and that his friends and relatives, they too felt unsafe walking on the street. So he's credible because he personally has felt fear, or that he knows people who have felt fear. And so that's why he's credible to talk about what Black Lives Matter is. But again, he doesn't want to persuade anybody to get involved in the initiative. Um, if you're talking about a particular type of bird, maybe you have that bird as a pet. So you talk about the past 10 years that you've been looking after this pet, then you're credible. If you want to talk about um, uh, taking care of toddlers, maybe you have a master's in early childhood development, or maybe you have a toddler at home, right? So these are all ways of being credible to talk about your topic. Obviously, you want to also have research that you've done. So that's where we talk about knowledge. These are using citations, so doing research and citing your sources. You want to have citations that are up to date, they're reliable. And so here I press that the internet contains a lot of garbage, right? And so you don't want to use sources that are from cosmopolitan.com or gq.com. You want to use places, academic journals, encyclopedias, databases, academic databases, where people have done research and have gone through editors and the information has been vetted. You want to make sure that your information is unbiased and it's directly relevant, right? And so there'll be an example in the book where the student is doing an informative speech on how red wine lowers your blood pressure, but you want to use sources that are not written by the wine industry, for example, right? So of course the wine industry wants you to drink more red wine, but that's not a source that you want to use in your informative speech topic. You want to use sources from places that talk about heart disease, or from hospitals, or from doctors, or from academic journals that have done research on how wine affects blood pressure and heart disease. So the last role of your speaker is to be relevant. So choose something that's interesting to you and is going to be interesting to your audience, right? And so if I'm speaking to a group of students, I don't necessarily want to talk about Medicare and retirement and retirement benefits, long-term care insurance, etc. I want to talk about something that is relevant to young adults. Also, you talk about a topic that is interesting to you, because then you get interested in it, you get passionate, and you're more likely to keep the audience's attention if you're interested in it as well. So let's now move on to the types of speeches. The first one is definitional. This is talking about meanings of concepts, theories, philosophies, or issues important to show relevance. So I'm going to talk about Oprah Winfrey when I talk about these types of informational speeches. So if I was doing a definitional speech about Oprah Winfrey, I would tell you about the day that she was born, where she grew up, and taking you through potentially a short history of her career. And if I was now talking about a descriptive speech of Oprah Winfrey, now I'd be providing a detailed, vivid word picture of a person, an animal, place, or object. So maybe I'm talking about more details about her career, the ups and downs of her career, and how that got her to where she is. Maybe I'm going to talk about her show, and I'm talking about her magazine. So all these different things that more describe who it is that she is. And so the title of my speech would be The Career of Oprah Winfrey, for example. Explanatory would be focusing on reports of current and historical events, customs, transformations, inventions, policies, outcomes, or options. And so again, if I'm talking about Oprah Winfrey, maybe here I would be talking about her home in Santa Barbara, right? So how she decided on this home, why she chose this property, what the property looks like, and potentially all about the conflicts that she's seen on this property, because it is such a large property. She's been criticized for her use of water, of her some workplace practices with her employees. So I'd be explaining a little bit more about something in her life. And then a demonstration. Here's where we show listeners how some process is accomplished or how to perform it. And so if I was talking about Oprah Winfrey here, I would maybe be demonstrating how how she prepares for her how she demonstrates how she prepares for her show every day, right? How what time she leaves her house. I would be showing you photos potentially of her dressing room. I'd be showing you photos of her makeup team, of her preparation, of her reading of the script, etc. And then how she practices and how she arrives um, on set for her show. So there are lots of different ways that you can talk about a particular topic, and just deciding on what type of informational speech that you'd like to give. Now we're talking about developing your speech, and this is also known as the goals of informative speeches. First, we want to arouse the interest of your audience, and the book mentions a handful of different ways to do that. You can talk about intensity, right? So the example that they give in the book is something that could be intense is talking about um, a mushroom-based chemical that helps decompose a body when someone dies above the earth, as opposed to putting these harsh chemicals on the body when it goes below the earth. So that's pretty intense, right? Now we're talking about death, we're talking about chemicals, we're talking about dead bodies. Oh my gosh, I'm really grabbing your attention, right? If I'm talking about this mushroom-based process. You can also talk about novelty, right? So talking about something that's novel. What comes to mind is the movie A Wonderful Life, right? So that is a movie that we play often during Christmas time, during the holidays, and it's novel. It's something cute, something quaint, something that people can easily remember. Then the next thing they talk about is contrast. So if you're talking about jalapeno peppers, for example, you might want to talk about jalapeno peppers that are, uh, not so hot, not so spicy, and then jalapeno peppers that are super spicy. So now you're contrasting different types of jalapeno peppers, but the topic is are the peppers. You can talk about activity or include activity in your informative speech. And the best example here is showing a video. Super, super useful, right? Showing a clip, 30 seconds, 60 seconds of a video that shows something, that demonstrates something in your speech. Activity is also moving around the room or using your hands or your voice or your head to create some sort of additional activity for your speech. Good. And then the last piece to arouse your audience is really nice humor, which we'll mention again in this course. Humor goes a long way. The second section here of developing an informative speech is presenting information that can be understood to stimulate audience intellect. So we want to make sure that you're talking about maybe something that is unique, something that they've never heard about, something that is really special. And so last semester, I had a student talk about how juries are chosen, right? So we all know potentially what a jury is and what a judge is, and the defense, and what an attorney is, but we wouldn't necessarily know how the juries are chosen. And so she took us through that process, and that really was a unique process, and it really challenged our initial set of knowledge. You can also tell a story, right? Super, super effective, right? If I was talking about early childhood behavior here, maybe I would tell a story about working with my son and saying that he threw a tantrum the other day, and I'm teaching him to express his emotions, right? Telling him that I should, when he gets angry, I'm saying, asking him, is he sad? Is he mad? Is he frustrated? So, telling you a story of when he, threw a tantrum when he didn't want to leave the park. Also be creative. So use a combination of all these different things. Use something that is unique to you. If you're knowledgeable potentially about cooking, or you're knowledgeable about your Hispanic culture, bring that into your informative speech. Lastly here, help the audience remember what it is that you said. Organize your speech logically, right? So we're going to talk about in this course having an introduction and conclusion, and having 2 to 7 main points in your body. And so walking the audience through those main points. You want to also use simple language. You want to use language that is not too complex. Use language that the audience can understand. You also want to avoid information overload, so not bombarding them with too many graphs or charts or data. You want to build in repetition, right? A good example of that is Martin Luther King, right? When he had that memorable speech, right? I have a dream. He said, I have a dream that da 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 da. I have a dream that da 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 da, right? So he says that over and over and over again. And it really helps us remember his speech and what it is that he's talking about. You want to appeal to different ways of learning, as I've also mentioned here in this course, right? That using visual aids, not only talking about your topic, but showing them on a slide what it is that you're talking about, or having a bird if you're talking about your pet bird, or having a piece of clothing if you're talking about fashion, right? So using not only an audible way of communicating your speech, but using your people have looking at something, and also movement and visuals. If you're working in a real life audience, maybe having them feel something or smell something. And as I've already mentioned here, use visuals, right? So use handouts. If you're in an audience, use slideware, use videos. We'll do a whole chapter on just using visual aids if you haven't already. Great. And so that completes our chapter on informational speaking. Please let me know if you have any questions. As I mentioned, this is Professor Green, and this is chapter 15 from the Public Speaking Project.